And what would it take to reset the relationship? You talk about Congress, but what about the relationship with President Trump himself?
I think the political will is what is needed most in this situation. And I believe there are several areas where US and Russia can and should work together cooperatively. Non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, countering terrorism, illicit migration, trafficking in people, climate change, you name it, and regional conflicts. In fact, we are working in a more positive manner on Syria in recent time. I hope this positive experience can proliferate to other areas as I have described. We are ready. We are stretching our hand forward. We are hopeful that someone on the other side, President Trump included, but also others, may see here a chance for a somewhat different way.
You know, you mentioned Syria. CIA Director Mike Pompeo said that any suggestion that Russia is an ally in the fight against ISIS has not been borne out in their actions. You seem to disagree with that. Can you give us some examples?
I think what is going on in Syria in terms of establishment of zone of de-escalation in the southwestern part of that country is a very vivid, very impressive example of what is still possible. I think also we are partners at platforms like Astana process, like Geneva process. We are working on humanitarian issues. Despite all the differences, we made huge progress on dismantlement of the Syrian military chemical program. One may have further examples. Syria is a tragic place. It's an incredible bloodshed that happened there. We are still hopeful that despite all of this, it can be turned into a country where stability is established, where we have a sovereign, independent state that is, duly integrated in an international system. The Syrians should decide themselves what they should do with their country. Others, including us and the US for that case, should help them. And that's the whole core, the essential element of the Russian policy towards Syria. We invite US to follow suit.
I want to go back to President Trump again in the relationship. What do you think of President Trump? I mean, he has said the investigation into Russia and the Trump campaign is a witch hunt. So what do you think of him and statements like that?
Well, we respect President Trump as a leader of a nation that is quite superpowerish in so many ways. And thus, the reason for all the importance and all the attention we attach to this relationship. But we also think that the most unexpected and most strange and dangerous development that happened in recent time had to do exactly with a very speculative use of Russia as an ocean and relationship with Russia as a tool in a very bitter fight, in fact, in a bitter war against President Trump by those who still cannot live with an idea that they and their candidate failed at the previous election. Another thing which is very...
Well, you said, let me stop you there.
Please.
You said last November, just after the election, that there were contacts with the Trump team and that you knew most of the people from his entourage. What kind of contacts and who were you talking about?
You have to go through all the hearings and all the material which is available by now for the Congress and for the general public, and also through all sorts of leakages from the administration to CNN and other media outlets, to New York Times, you name it. You'll have all the names, but my point here is if the ambassador...
But I'd like to hear it from you, sir.
Sorry? Once again, an echo there.
Could you tell me the names and the contacts? And
that's what I'm going to do, ma'am.
I know. I'd just like to hear it from you, sir, if I could.
Right. If Ambassador Kislyak was not contacting some people on the other side, so to say, he wouldn't perform his functions as he should. And in fact, the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations require diplomatic missions in every country to maintain as widespread contacts as possible, to learn more on the circumstances of the host country, to use the exact words of the convention. That was exactly what Kislyak was doing. And he was not spying and he was not recruiting. If he did so, I would be now a prima ballerina of the Bolshoi Ballet, if you know what it means.
It recently came out that Donald Trump's son and top members of the campaign met with a lawyer with ties to Russia. In an email written by an intermediary, Don Jr. was promised material gathered by the Crown Prosecutor of Russia, official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary and her dealings with Russia. Was Russia providing damaging information on Hillary Clinton to the Trump campaign?
I think what is fair to say here is every single contact, every single call, every single message, every single email is being followed, scrutinized, eavesdropped by services in the US. We know how it is. We do think that it's to the detriment of the whole course of a better relationship. And in fact, you are in Washington. What is Washington? Washington is a city, Washington, D.C., where everyone meets and everyone talks. And the very fact that someone saw some Russian or Russians somewhere is now close to a criminal act, I think it's ridiculous. It's degrading for such a great country as the United States.
Well, was Russia providing damaging information about Hillary Clinton to the Trump campaign?
All the information which we provide to anyone can be easily found in open sources. We are not doing anything to the detriment of the domestic developments or internal affairs of any country, the US included. It's very, very far from the very principles of the Russian foreign policy, which is to be watchy on the preservation of international law, to be equal and respectful to others. That's what we are doing on a daily basis. And we will be guided by these principles also in the future.
And President Trump says the U.S. Attorney General should look into Hillary Clinton's ties with Russia. Does the Russian government have any evidence she or any members of her campaign did anything criminally with your country?
The only ties to Russia of Ms. Clinton, which I'm aware of, are those working relationship which she established with Minister Lavrov when she was Secretary of State, and this is almost it. I don't know, I'm not aware of any other contacts or any other information provided to her by any Russian officials or any Russian citizens.
And finally, Mr. Deputy Minister, North Korea has conducted another ballistic missile test, another ICBM test. Secretary of State Tillerson said after the very first ICBM test back on July 4th, any country that provides any economic or military benefits or fails to fully implement UN Security Council resolutions is aiding and abetting a dangerous regime. South Korea said this week that Russia, have roughly doubled oil shipments and exports in the past few months compared to last year. That sounds like Secretary Tillerson's definition of aiding and abetting.
I think that it's very selective how people pay attention or quote sources. In some cases, you completely ignore what Pyongyang says. In some other cases, you highlight it to the exceeds. What I'm saying to you is we are prepared to work cooperatively with the US, with this administration, with Secretary Tillerson and everyone in his team on peaceful, pacific resolution of this issue. And that is to denuclearize the whole Korean peninsula. My hope would be that everyone there shows restraint. The provocations of the North Korean side are inadmissible, and thus Russia works with others, the US included, China included, on a series of UN Security Council resolutions that essentially impose measures on North Korea because North Korea is in non-compliance with international law and other decisions. But having said that, I would also say that like on this tit-for-tat game or play between Moscow and Washington, on northern Eastern Asia, we should be very worried not to inflict further damage. We should show restraint, and if US and US allies with whom we maintain excellent relationships show some restraint, I think it should be and will be heard and seen and detected and registered in Pyongyang, and thus we would open a somewhat different chapter there.
But when you talk about restraint, they continue to fire these missiles. So what's your reaction to this latest missile firing?
We are in the process of discussing a draft resolution of the UN Security Council that would take further measures, and we are prepared to do so. But this resolution should not equal measures that are targeted on stopping the illegal activities of Pyongyang in the area of nuclear weaponization and missile developments, to the whole issue of economic suffocation of the whole country. Here we have a red line which we should observe. We are hopeful we will find a way forward collectively, cooperatively in New York at the Security Council, and we will continue our bilateral exchanges with Washington on this issue because it's very serious and it's dangerous, and we are concerned. North Korea is very close to Russian borders.
And do you have any idea how soon you believe that North Korea would be capable of carrying a nuclear missile to the U.S. homeland?
I think we are years and years away from a moment when they can weaponize. What they're testing are quite primitive devices which require months for preparation and which are essentially pieces of equipment with all sorts of wires and all sorts of additional elements around them that simply cannot be put on top of any missile. So to come that small in terms of a weapon would require a very different type of technological quality and development. We differ with the US in the assessment of threat from North Korea. We think that the previous missile test was that of an intermediate range missile and not an intercontinental ballistic missile, as the US side and the US government says. But all this should be discussed, and that this is debatable, and we should find a proper way forward on a truly common basis. That's my whole point.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Deputy Minister.
Thank you for having me, ma'am, and I wish you good time in Washington.